So what is your personal belief when it comes to the resurrection? What do you think do you have a belief, or do you just try to interpret the text and try to see what is the message?
They saw Jesus resurrected. Like, there's something different that goes on there, that they're like, this is a miracle, right? Dead people don't usually rise from the dead.
What if everything we've been taught was built on a single misunderstanding?
Well, I think, so as a historian, I do think it is a historical question. You have a guy who objectively lived, he objectively died, and then individuals close to his inner circle claim that they see him not dead.
Right.
Again.
This is a highly unusual activity.
Highly unusual.
Right. So, but it's hard when you're dealing with illiterate populations, you're dealing with thousands of years of time, you're dealing with an oral tradition.
How do you prove someone came back from the dead without a single photo, video, or recording?
It's very difficult for anybody who thinks of themselves as an intelligent person who's secular to even entertain the possibility that someone died and come back to life.
And I get that, but we've already talked about the fact that we don't think that the only thing that exists is matter and motion. We as in you and I, right? Like, we believe that there's something else going on in this world that's a little bit crazy.
There's something else.
And that to, I think, exclude that, I think excludes something that you're kind of putting blinders on for.
Is it faith or just collective memory gone wild?
You have groups of individuals who could have fact-checked those things. So,
how do you fact-check someone coming back from the dead?
Well,
how many people saw his body, right?
Well, Paul says that 400 people saw him all at once.
400 people saw the crucifixion?
No, saw the resurrected Jesus. Yeah, 1 Corinthians 15, Paul says that Jesus appeared to the disciples, and then he appeared to 400 people all at once. I mean, if we read the Gospel of Luke and the Gospel of Luke and Acts,
why would hundreds claim to see something that never happened?
He says that Jesus was walking around teaching them for 40 days after he was resurrected from the dead. And so these are written within a time period when you have people who would have seen Jesus's ministry, who were there, say, at something like the feeding of the 5,000, who could have been able to verify or debunk some of these things that are being said.
Or why would they lie?
Do you think it's possible that he didn't die? And do you think it's possible that they thought he was dead? Because that does happen. There was actually a case very recently where a guy was about to be harvested for organs. They thought he was dead, and this guy started moving again and came back to life. It's a very, very bizarre case because his family had been told that he was going to be harvested for organs. They were preparing for that.
Yeah.
This guy comes back.
Could the world's most influential story be based on a miracle or a medical mistake?
Very skeptical biblical scholars, like non-believing, atheist, agnostic, Christian scholars, they will say if we can know anything about Jesus, like they'll cast a doubt on a lot of the things that we read about in the Gospels in terms of the actual historical Jesus of Nazareth. They'll say one thing we can be sure of is that he died by crucifixion under Pontius Pilate. Because we have not just multiple attested documents that we refer to as the New Testament, but Roman and Greek and Jewish writers refer to that claim afterwards.
What if he never died at all?
So one of our earliest, in fact, not one of, the earliest depiction of Jesus on the cross is called the Alexamenos Graphido. And it's probably from the end of the 1st century. And it's it depicts an individual with their arms raised in an act of worship.
What if resurrection wasn't a spiritual event, but a misdiagnosis?
Crucifixion was for the lowest of the low. It was for, like, slaves. In fact, if you were a Roman citizen, you were banned from being crucified.
Who was it that got crucified upside down?
Peter.
Why? Was it because, like, regular crucifixion wasn't good enough for him? Or what was it? He didn't deserve it because Christ had gone through it?
Well, so the story is that they say, we're going to crucify you. And he says, it's like too big of an honor to die like my Lord. And they say, well, we can fix that.
Oh, Jesus. Shut your mouth, buddy.
Listen, the Romans were pretty brutal.
Oh, yeah.
We know the Romans didn't mess up crucifixions.
We could diagnose how Jesus died. How would he have died? And so they basically came up with this idea that he probably asphyxiated to death. You kind of drown in your own blood. But the chances of Jesus surviving the crucifixion, I think, are narrow to none. The first thing you do if you survive a crucifixion and then you go and you find your disciples, the first thing you say is not, peace be with you. It's get me to a hospital, right?
Did they have them back then?
No, not really.
Also, are we entirely certain of their measurement of days?
So this is an interesting question because of the differences between when the Gospel of John says Jesus died compared to the Synoptics.
So why does this story keep surviving?
Jews, any part of a day was considered a day. So 3 days and 3 nights becomes almost an idiom for any part of that day is the day. So if Jesus, and because they count evening to morning is the day, it's very possible that it wasn't like how we would think of 3 24-hour days, especially if he dies on Friday and wakes up on Sunday.
Why did this movement explode while others faded into silence?
How many different people have some sort of a recollection or a writing or something that's attributed to them of being witness to his resurrection?
Well, you have Peter, Paul, Jude, James, and Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The thing with Matthew, Mark, and Luke is that Matthew and John are attributed to direct disciples of Jesus. Luke and Mark are not. So they are not eyewitnesses within the Jesus community.
How does a dead man speak to millions, centuries later?
I'm going to use these methods that are expected as good history of my day. I'm not an eyewitness, so I'm going to try to find the people who are eyewitnesses, and I'm going to try to encapsulate this within a document that communicates what is being written.
So we have an account of the resurrection. Do we have an account of the denial of the resurrection? Is there an historical record of him just dying and this, like a rebuttal rather, to what they're saying?
And why do we still care?
No, the only ones from the ancient world that deny his resurrection are groups that come on afterwards that sometimes are described as Gnostics, and they're not necessarily just denying it for the reasons we might think they were. They're denying it because they have incorporated ideas of pagan philosophy, where they believe that the spiritual is good and the physical is bad. So if Jesus was crucified, let me back up. If Jesus is God, he cannot have a physical body. So they deny that he actually had a physicality to him.
What was real? What was rewritten?
So these groups that we describe as the docetics, they are denying that Jesus had a physical body. He only seemed to have a physical body. And they wrote documents later on. So the Gospel of Peter, which comes around in 2nd, 3rd, 4th centuries, is being written, and it has Jesus kind of chilling on the cross because he's not really physical, because he's divine, and physical entities don't have physical bodies.
And if it really happened, why do the earliest denials only come centuries later?
We don't actually get like a concrete denial of his resurrection in that way until you get things like the Gospel of Barnabas in the Middle Ages, which is it's actually the document that Billy brought up to me in the conversation we had, is the evidence that Jesus was never crucified, the Gospel of Barnabas. Well, Gospel of Barnabas is 15th century. It paraphrases Dante's Inferno. It's not an ancient document. So, but in the ancient world, nobody really had that big of a problem with these kind of supernatural claims.
One of the things you talked about was that there was this transference, like the Eucharist eventually became a placebo. Do you think that what do you think it was initially? Do you think it was a psychedelic mushroom?
So that's Allegro certainly thought that, right?
Right.
John
Marco Allegro, author of The Sacred Mushroom and the Scroll.
So he releases that book in 1970, and he claims that Christianity is the guise for a Near Eastern fertility cult.
Not a parable, not a metaphor, a real mind-altering mushroom.
And I think it's very interesting, but there aren't many linguists who support the proposition.
Right. There's a lot of people that disagree with him pretty heavily, right?
I mean, from like a purely linguistic perspective, it's, to explain it briefly, so he says that...
Did you read this, The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross?
Yeah.
Did you read it?
Several times.
Did you read the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Christian Myth as well?
From Allegro.
Yeah. That's the one that was... So the Catholic Church bought out the original one, right? And it was very difficult to get a hold of for the longest time. You had to buy.
Was the body of Christ actually a psychedelic?
And then he comes out with the second book, The Dead Sea Scrolls and the Christian Myth. What did you knowing as much as you know about language?
Yeah.
Like what did you feel like he made leaps? Did you feel like he made these connections that maybe were based on speculation?
So he writes, it's pure philology, right? So it's word games and things that only linguists, I think it's incredible that people who aren't linguists can actually read that. It's really, really difficult to read Sacred Mushroom and the Cross.
Why did ancient texts need code words?
The New Testament, written in Greek, has this Semitic substratum. So underneath the Greek, the author, the gospel writers and Paul are actually referring to different terms in Hebrew or Aramaic. And that these terms have in turn come from the Sumerian, which any linguist would say is a language isolate, that there is no real relationship between Sumerian and the Indo-European languages like Greek and the Semitic. So the premise of the argument is something that most linguists don't accept, one of the editions you probably have of Sacred Mushroom and the Cross. And he gets into some complex theories about psycholinguistics and this interesting idea that just because they aren't related, there are certain words, certain names, certain vocabulary, like plant definitions, which would carry across the different languages. And I find that somewhat interesting. But when you dig into the words that Allegro was recreating, he places an asterisk actually next to these words because they can't be corroborated by the ancient texts.
What secrets were baked into sacred language?
He straight up hypothesizes as existing, but they can't really be found in the existing tablets. So it's hard to correlate some of those meanings he draws down from the Sumerian. But that said, he makes very interesting claims. For example, like in 1 Corinthians 22, there's this interesting line where he says about we preach Christ crucified is a skandalon for the Jews and a folly for the Greeks. And skandalon in Greek means like a bolt or a snare, like a trap.
Was Christ crucified a symbol or a substance?
And Allegro ties it to like a tikla in Aramaic, which is like what he calls the bolt mushroom, and in Sumerian ukushtigila. And so he's saying that Paul's actually telling the Jews that the Christ crucified is a mushroom instead of a skandalon. It's like a code word. Like the skandalon is a mushroom, and then for the Greeks he says it's a folly, which is moira in Greek, which actually means mandrake, which is another psychedelic plant.
Why did the church fight so hard to bury this book?
Wordplay going on, but it's really hard to tease out any physical forensic evidence for this stuff, which was what I went after.
Was Allegro's position, if I recall correctly, that the sacred mushroom was Amanita muscaria?
Yeah, that was even the cover of his book. It was a photo of Amanita muscaria. And
that's where I think Allegro did amazing work, but that's one area where I have a problem with Amanita muscaria. Use Amanita muscaria by drinking it in the urine of a shaman who has previously consumed the mushroom, and I don't see a lot of evidence for that in early Christianity, and it's why I like the work that Brian has done, looking at the really hard evidence for psychedelics in early Christianity, which are not in this case Amanita muscaria. If I'm correct, Brian.
Isn't the speculation about Amanita muscaria that it's seasonable? It's seasonal. It's also genetically variable. Like there's different species of it. Like much like different fruits taste differently. There's different versions of the Amanita muscaria that have more psychedelic compounds in them.
And why did they allegedly buy out every copy? What if the Last Supper was a psychedelic ritual? Why do so many early religious symbols match shamanic practices?
But I'm told, I've not had the experience myself, but I'm told that if you can bear the idea of drinking the shaman's urine after he or she has consumed the Amanita muscaria, you will have a really powerful journey.
Yeah, but you don't want a shaman just laughing hysterically after you drink his urine.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, the joke's on you, stupid. Yeah. There's also so many correlations between the Amanita muscaria and Santa Claus to shamans. There's so
the colors, the red and white.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is this just academic speculation or the biggest cover-up in religious history?
the bag, the toys, the fact that they would dry them on these coniferous trees, the fact that these mushrooms have this mycorrhizal relationship with coniferous trees, where they tend to grow under pine trees, which is the tree that we use for Christmas trees. The fact that they're bright red, like a toy that is in a package waiting for a child to open it up. There's so many of these weird connections. The colors, the fact that reindeer are with Santa Claus.
How far would institutions go to protect the myth? Why are ancient fertility cults hiding beneath gospel pages?
Caribou are notoriously attracted to Amanita muscaria mushrooms. In fact, people that have had psychedelic rituals and gone outside to urinate have talked about caribou knocking them over to try to get to their urine. And caribou are reindeer. They have been observed eating these things. So they have this weird relationship. All those things are together, connected in some sort of a strange way. And there's also a history of shamanic rituals being outlawed in Siberia. They would climb onto people's roofs and slide down the chimney to deliver the mushrooms. It's
just another example of the way that our culture takes an ancient historical truth and completely castrates it and turns it into Santa Claus. Whereas what we're actually dealing with are profound experiences in deeply altered states of consciousness.
Well, it's also, this information seems to have been lost fairly recently.
Red robes, pine trees, flying reindeer. Are we still tripping? Every Christmas? Was Santa once a Siberian shaman, sliding down chimneys with mushrooms?
To the early 1950s and 40s, and look at Christmas cards. The Christmas cards and depictions of Christmas almost always contained elves and Amanita muscaria mushrooms. The Amanita muscaria mushroom was synonymous with Christmas for some strange reason. Have you ever seen those old? Yeah, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Like, what is that? Like,
it's all over the fairy tale books too. You can't avoid the Amanita.
Yeah,
everywhere you look, which is why I think Allegro was also interested, writing in 1970 and studying it.
What else have we turned into fairy tales? They said it was a mushroom. They said it opens the gates of heaven.
But it's such an unconvincing mushroom. Like, the people that I know that have experienced it in terms of a psychedelic ritual, it's just, I don't know anybody who's really blown their brains out with it.
No, and Gordon Wasson also thought it was the ingredient behind Soma as well. He writes a book about this in 1968, Soma, Divine Mushroom of Immortality. That was his guess too for Soma.
But Wasson was experienced with psilocybin, which is so universally regarded as being effective.
Wasson, to explain where this comes from, Wasson has this incredible experience with Maria Sabina in 1955 in Oaxaca, Mexico, and when he consumes we think psilocybe mexicana. And he is catapulted to the heavens, and he has this vision that he describes as the realest thing he's ever experienced under the influence of the psilocybin. And the thought occurs to him, he writes later in 1957 in Life magazine. He says that could it be the case that the divine mushrooms are in fact the answer behind the ancient mysteries?
But if that's true, then what exactly have we been worshiping all this time? And who wanted us to forget?
Which is why he then went and started looking at the Amanita, perhaps, or eventually ergot, which is where I pick up the scent. At some point in his correspondence with Albert Hoffman, they together began focusing on ergot, like we said, because it's so common and so natural, but so highly toxic too. And Albert claimed to have this experience with it, and so for years and years, after teaming up with Carl Ruck, they were convinced that ergot had to somehow be in.
Yeah, but that is why this is a problem, is that there's many people that live their lives by these ridiculous ideologies that are illogical.
Okay, so I'm going to challenge you on this.
Protect them from predators and Facebook likes.
I'm going to challenge you on this.
Please do.
Catholicism is not a cult.
What is the difference between a cult? I had a bit for my act. Let me just...
Sure.
A cult is bullshit.
Is there really a difference, or just branding?
And it's created by one person, and he knows it's bullshit. In a religion, that guy's dead.
Okay. So let me. This is rough territory. But
for you,
okay. Let's say
for me, this is every day.
Let's say, yeah, all right. Let's say Moses comes down the mountain with the tablets.
Oh, that dude.
Okay, I don't know if Moses did come down the mountain with the tablets.
I don't think he did.
Let's say he did.
But okay.
Did he know he was bullshitting people?
Well, do you know what religious scholars actually believe in Jerusalem? Actually believe that was all about now?
What if a burning bush was actually a psychedelic hallucination?
The whole burning bush?
Tell me.
They believe it was the acacia bush, which is rich in DMT, and they think the metaphor of the burning bush was actually a psychedelic experience, and that Moses, during this psychedelic DMT experience, came back from the other dimension that you go into when you go into the DMT trance with all this really these standard messages that I myself have gotten from these psychedelic experiences.
And what if that hallucination built an empire?
That you have to treat each other as if we're all one, and that our separations are all illusions, that you are literally living a life that if I was born in your body and I had your genetics, I would be you and you would be me, because we are all the same. And our differences are really what the illusion is. We are these temporary beings, and that negative thinking and negative feelings and all these things manifest themselves in negative actions and negative thoughts, and you can change that. You can change the frequency in which you exist in this world.
Okay.
Like, this is essentially what...
Can you trust a message if it was received on drugs?
The 3,000-year-old version of Moses, or more than that, Moses' tablets were. That they were... The God was the burning bush.
Perfect.
Right.
So, let me ask you a question. You've done some hallucinogens.
Oh, yeah.
And you've had some insight.
Yeah.
And that insight had something to do with treating people well.
Yes, it definitely did.
Okay. Was it true?
Well, it definitely has benefited me. True or false, if you ask me, is it true that you have had positive experiences?
How many truths have we mistaken for divine law?
Where you have interpreted those experiences and improved your life. Yes, that's true.
Okay. So if you now go and you convey that thing to somebody who hasn't had the experience themselves, is it bullshit?
Well, here's the thing about psychedelics as opposed to all the other ideologies, is that they're very repeatable. You don't have to believe in DMT. If you smoke it, you're going to experience it whether you believe in it or not.
Right. And actually, I think this is, I am a cautious fan. I say cautious because I don't think, air quotes, God is marvelous, because air quotes, God is the real deal.
Yeah.
Right? In other words, it's not a dude on a cloud.
Right.
It's something... it is a metaphor for something lodged very deep in the mind where you can't find it directly, and this is a hack that many cultures have used to access that layer.
And it's all very familiar to us, and when you talk to people that have studied DMT in particular, one of the reasons why I think it's so familiar to us, when you have this experience, one of the first things that happens is you feel like you've been there before. And they believe that this is because...
Is your dream state more real than your waking one?
Brain produces DMT.
Yep.
You know, it's very difficult to monitor, but they have been able to, through the Cottonwood Research Foundation, which all started from the work of Dr. Rick Strassman out of the University of New Mexico, who wrote a book called DMT, the Spirit Molecule, which was one of the very first times where the DEA allowed them to do clinical studies on people with intravenous dimethyltryptamine, which is like fucking serious shit. Mm-hmm. So instead of like this 10 to 15 minute trip, you're gone for a long time.
Why does DMT feel like a home you've never visited?
Half hour plus, and deep experiences that a lot of these people mirrored. They had like super similar experiences, but through the Cottonwood Research Foundation, they found that live rats are producing DMT in their pineal gland. This has been proven now, which was really just speculation. There was anecdotal evidence, but now they know that rats produce this. Well, so they don't know exactly when people do it, because they would have to do the same thing they do to rats. They'd have to open your brain up. Until they develop some sort of sophisticated detection methods, it's just speculation as to when the brain's producing this incredibly potent psychedelic drug. But it's there.
And why do so many people see the same gods?
The exercise of thinking, even in this psychedelic way, that it's happening for a reason, right? And that means that we have carried this with us from an ancestral state into the modern state, and we now have molecules that we can trigger it when we want to. That gives you access to a style of thinking that you're telling me has altered your understanding of your relationship to other people, and that it metaphorically lines up with what you often hear delivered in religious terms.
What happens when science meets scripture in your bloodstream?
When you say Catholicism is a cult, I don't agree, because Catholicism historically must have been delivering messages that caused people to correct their thinking in ways that made them collaborate more effectively, that made them better able to find the opportunities in their environment. I'm not advocating that we should sign up for belief systems that are at odds with our modern environment. Is that religions that have stood the test of time did so because their value to the people who believed in them was so great that those that disbelieved were outcompeted. Now, so we get into trouble in the modern circumstance because we can look at many of the teachings of any of these ancient religions and we can compare them to what we learn scientifically and detect that there's something not right.
If our brains produce psychedelics naturally, what are they trying to show us?
Can I stop you there?
Sure.
Scientology, is that a cult?
Too early to tell.
Okay, but let's stop.
Well,
because
but
we
hold
know
on.
the guy who created it.
Well, we do, but we all, so let me drag you back.
Okay.
So, by the way, I'm very uncomfortable with Scientology and what it does. But the problem is, as Scientology itself points out, if you looked at the inception of something like the Catholic Church, you might be equally troubled.
Sure.
Are we meant to access hidden realms or avoid them entirely?
What do you think a cult is? What do you think a cult is?
Well, I think a cult is the predatory version. It is tapping into people's natural tendency to believe in what I call metaphorical truths, and it is using it very often to extract resources from them.
Like the Catholic Church.
Well, no, not like
No?
the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is so long-standing, and the population that has believing in these things, then cult is not the correct...
I think you and I have different terms. We're using different definitions of the word cult then.
But let me
Okay,
take,
yeah,
there's a
sorry, go
very
ahead.
interesting comparison. So Joseph Smith, who started the Mormon Church, had a competitor.
14.
Right. He had a competitor at the time. There's a book called The Kingdom of Matthias, right, about his competitor at the time. And to me, the two looked equally plausible, the story that they were selling. Now, Matthias never had more than 30
Was the Pope a spiritual leader or the CEO of an ancient brand?
followers, and his religion died out, and Joseph Smith won, and then the Mormon Church is obviously a real thing. But these sets of beliefs are advanced by somebody, whether those somebodies are cynical when they do it or whether they are earnest. I think many of these, the ones that we have that have lasted for long periods of time, have been advanced by somebody who was, in one way or another, conscious or not,
Why do the rules of God always benefit the structure more than the people?
DMT or not, tapped into something that, when delivered to other people, actually constituted a kind of insight. Now,
As opposed to being a con man.
Right.
Okay, and so the origins of the Catholic Church most likely came from some desire for order and a scaffolding of how to behave and to give people rules and structure for how to get through this life with the most amount of positivity and love.
Could confession be surveillance in disguise?
Disciplining them and having these grave punishments being held over their head, burning in the fires of the pits of hell if they decide to have sex with another man, or wear two different types of cloth, or whatever the other silly things that were in the Old Testament. By doing this, what they've essentially tried to do is offer people structure.
No, it's not really structure. It is an analog for truths that can't be spoken literally because nobody knows how to phrase them. So let's deal with the church on the one hand and Moses on the other.
Okay.
Moses is obviously important in Jewish history. If Moses ate some DMT from the acacia bush,
I think it was smoke.
oh, he smoked
That's why the whole thing of the burning bush.
Okay. So let's say he smoked it. Let's say he was super savvy and farsighted, and obviously he didn't know anything about molecules.
Right.
But suppose that he had some ancient model of something, and there must have been something in that plant that caused crazy things to happen. Let's suppose he didn't believe that he had contacted God or that God had contacted him.
Is control disguised as forgiveness?
But he woke up from the thing and was like, wait a minute, I know what these people are doing wrong. I'm going to write it down and tell them came from God.
Right.
Is Judaism now a cult?
I think they're all cults. I think all ideologies are cults. I don't know. I don't think there is any one person who wrote, first of all, when you're dealing with Christianity, you're dealing with translations spoken anymore.
Right.
And you're also dealing with an oral tradition of who knows how many years before it was ever bothered to be written down. But, but written down by people. And then people decide what stays in and what doesn't. They change the rules. Like the priests used to be able to marry. Priests in the Catholic Church, the Pope used to have wives.
Sure.
You know, they ran armies. I mean, this is clearly something that human beings have a hand in manipulating and changing, and they do it for the benefit
If your spiritual guide doesn't have children, whose future is he protecting?
of the structure itself.
Well,
they're not doing it for the benefit of the human beings that are a part of it. They're doing it for the benefit of the structure itself.
Oh, that I don't agree.
What's in what case? With like the money and the amount of power?
I'm not saying you don't have corruption in all of these structures. Okay. You do. But I am saying that there is this is exactly parallel to what we were talking about before. There is the predatory version, which I would call a cult.
Right.
And there is the earnest version, which I would not call a cult.
Maybe we should just say a structure created by human beings, which is basically all structures, all models of behavior where you have to adhere to certain things. But the problem with religion, and even with a lot of cults, is these supposed grave consequences for deviating, right?
Well, so all right, let's pick up Catholicism because it's easy because so much of the structure is visible to us.
Yeah.
Okay. I would argue that Catholicism, this is going to be true of...
Do you see the pattern yet, or are you already inside it?
How are these priests who don't marry passing on their genes?
They're not.
Oh, they are.
Oh. What are they doing? They're sneaky?
No, they're facilitating the stability of the lineage that they are in charge of. So the point is, they don't pass on their genes directly. They're passing on their genes indirectly through the population. Their interests are synonymized with the population that they are preaching to.
What if everything sacred started as a trip?
That's what you've been doing wrong. Imagine it's adultery, right?
Okay.
Oh, God. If I die before next week and I haven't confessed my adultery,
you go to hell.
I'm going to go to hell. That's bad. Hell is
a
very unpleasant place.
Tell that guy who doesn't get to have sex.
I'm going to tell him. So now the person I've been committing adultery with is thinking, oh, shit, well, I was going to keep this a secret. But now the priest is going to know that I've been committing adultery because he's going to hear from the other person, and so I better confess too. So now the priest has a sense of like, oh, there's an adultery problem in the congregation, and the priest is,
And what if you're next?
Flipping through the book and thinking, oh, this week, what should we talk about? And so, the priest then gets up at the pulpit and, turn your book to Psalm whatever, and starts going on about adultery. And the people in the congregation who are engaged in adultery are thinking, oh, shit, this is God talking to me directly. God knows what I've been up to, and he's not happy, and that's why we're reading this psalm. I better cut it the fuck out, right? So my point is, dog in that fight, because he's not involved in business. He's not involved in mating and dating.
That's all relatively recent when it comes to the Catholic Church in the last couple hundred years.
Yes, and I would argue if you look back at any of these traditions, any of the ones that worked will successfully have addressed the question of how you prevent corruption from emerging.
Well, apparently it was sexual corruption. These guys were rock stars. Like the priests were essentially the guys who had the direct line to God, and just like professors have been known to do, not you, but some.
Ability to get away with stuff. I'm not saying it's zero. Obviously it's not. But the idea that there will be protections in each tradition for this, that religions that don't successfully protect against abuses of power will succumb in competition to religions that do it effectively. And so you're absolutely correct that all of the changes in religious texts that people believe in, that's all human beings making decisions about what to keep and what to throw out. I'm not arguing anything.
What if enlightenment was never divine, just chemical? Are ancient rituals just misunderstood neuroscience?
About what to keep from the point of view of the particular problems faced by the population that they are in, will have a competitive advantage because they will function more cohesively than a population of atheists who doesn't have somebody looking out to prevent outbreaks of competition inside the lineage or outbreaks of infighting.
So if you were looking at it,
Is heaven a reward or a hallucination? What secrets were buried by the ones who translated the original texts?
in an objective way, like say if you were an alien from another planet that didn't understand the language and you just observing the structure, you would see this error correction in the structure. It would say, oh, they realized there's an issue here with power, and so they error corrected by making these priests be celibate, and then they figured out a way to keep them from having money, and that'll keep them from being invested in, okay.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
And I think it's very misleading to people who analyze things the way you and I would, because there's so much hocus pocus associated with these structures that, it's like constantly putting a finger in the eye of an analytical person.
Of course. I mean, just the way they dress, right? I mean, just the wearing the wizard costume and holding the staff and sitting on the golden throne and all of it. I mean, all the pageantry to it. It's all preposterous.
I mean, I agree. Looking at it as a modern person, it looks preposterous to me. On the other hand, there is no way, I'm telling you, I mean, most of my colleagues, I'm sure, would disagree with this, but I hope to show them to be wrong on this front. There is no way that the huge amount of effort and resource that is invested in these structures was an error.
If you enjoyed today's episode on JRE Plus, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you.